Welcome to Darshan America, folks. We come to you from Washington, D.C. My name is Ramesh Butani.
And I'm Aastha Verma.
One of the most puzzling things in America has been, from last 20 years at least that I know of, so much money is being spent on training, making sure people adopt a career, get a job and the others. But I've never seen the stats as to how successful that has been. Those billions and billions of dollars have been awarded to companies or unions or the others to retrain the American. Unemployment is still a baffling problem.
It's kind of like the banking industry, where we bailed out the banks, and the banks have money. In fact, they've had profitable quarters, but they're not lending to people.
I keep reading the newspapers and the others. I find it that everyone is now asking, what are we going to do? For instance, this past week in the Washington Post, they did a beautiful story where they showed that big mega companies, the Pfizers, the GEs, the McDonald's, and so on and so forth, many of these companies have more employees outside than they have inside here in the United States.
When I read this story, I was angry. I was angry because there's so many of these American companies that you think of uniquely American, GE, Pfizer, Procter & Gamble, right? But these companies are not required by federal law to tell the government how many employees they have here in the United States versus elsewhere globally. And what you find is that, in fact, many of them, less than half of the workforce is in the United States. I mean, these numbers are pretty staggering here. In GE, in 2010, only 46% of GE's 287,000 employees were based here in the United States. Here's another one. Procter & Gamble, they are the advertisers of everything, every brand we can think of. In the United States, Procter & Gamble only has 35,000 people, which is only 28% of its workforce.
That's right. And, when they advertise, very iconic American company.
They love to put those ads on TV, and we like to feel good about them. But, really as consumers, we should demand more from our government. The reality is there's no law requiring companies to reveal publicly where their employees are based. Companies can choose.
That's right.
To include the breakdown of jobs for their SEC filings, but they're not required by law. So really, it's a due diligence on the part of the companies to report. And in fact, now that this article is out, people have begun to ask questions, and these companies are having to step back and say, whoa, wait a minute, do we have to really answer these questions?
That's right, because they are saying that their first responsibility is to the shareholder. They want to make sure they make money for him. But, in all honesty, I need to ask, yes, this is a big problem, okay? So what's the solution? I mean, we whine, we complain, we do other things, and we say, well, what is the solution?
Well, one solution is to take away the tax breaks and incentives and loopholes that exist for these companies where they profit on both sides.
No, but wait a second. Punishment is not the proper way to encourage these companies to bring it here. I personally think that we need to find out, why are they so scared of American workers? I feel like the government should just do away with dictating to the employers how much you need to pay, how much you need to do this, you need to give this, you need to give that. The other countries don't have that requirement. And that's probably the only reason I see that these iconic American companies much prefer to have employees in other countries than here, produce goods in other countries than here. I mean, that's how we lost all the middle jobs,
Well, it's interesting. So the head of Obama's Job Council, he is the chief executive of GE, right? GE, we know GE.
Mr. Immelt.
Mr. Jeff Immelt. Now, he did say this, that many companies, including GE, got carried away with outsourcing. So he's willing to admit that, when outsourcing became hot, his company, like all the other companies, went chasing after the profit because obviously outsourcing is so much cheaper. But now, of course, now that they're realizing the impact on the U.S. government, some of them, including GE, are starting to reverse course. They are starting to create more jobs here in the U.S., realizing that they have maybe an obligation to do that. But I think it's a two-part problem. These companies don't have any laws requiring them to be transparent, and that to me is the biggest objection here, is why can't we be transparent with regards to how these companies are run?
I have no problem. They do business in China. They can produce goods in China, and they can sell it in China. They can make as much money. I have no problem with that. It's what they do is they make goods in China for Chinese as well as for Americans. So they give double employment to China, no employment to United States. So we need to come up with some kind of a policy changes. I have one in my mind. To curb smoking, you say raise the cost of the cigarette. To curb gas consumption, raise the taxes on the gas and the others. And so if you want to reduce the imports, how about just raising the tax on the imports? What it'll do will make the outside goods maybe more expensive by 20-30%. That's what will give incentive to Americans to start building it here. You know, right now, it's the cheap labor, regulated labor, which is what the companies hate. Companies like to be like kings. They want to do whatever they want to do. I mean, you tell them to have regulations, they just get all grumpy. That's why they go to these third world countries and they want to build things up there because no one is questioning
Well, because we
that.
have evolved through our industrial age to have protections. Those regulations exist as a way to protect, to make sure that these companies don't get into practices that are shady or detrimental. And yet, in fact, you know, they enjoy those perks overseas, they take the jobs overseas, but they keep calling themselves American companies.
Because they want the protection of America.
That's right.
I've been thinking about this for a little while now. How do you solve this problem? I mean, you can say Obama is this and Rick Perry is this and that and the others, but there needs to be a theme. In Texas, according to Rick Perry, the candidate for president, he says the reason in Texas we have jobs is because we are a right-to-work state. We don't allow unions to dictate to us.
But that has been debunked a little bit. You know, his statement about having created 1 million jobs on his own, those are actually government jobs. Right?
No,
they were created by the federal sector.
They were created with some kind of a help from the government, but not government jobs in itself. But let me finish the point. Governor Rick Perry says that he decimated the environmental requirements and he decimated the requirements of the employer. And that's how he created jobs. So maybe there is some kind of a light up there. Not that you have to follow that model, but you got to look at it. You got to ask these companies, what will it take to bring the jobs back here?
But do we really have to sacrifice our environment? Do we really have to sacrifice protections for our employees to try to create jobs? There's got to be a better way. I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, our problems stem from not having a very strong manufacturing core, right? So we do have people out there who are